I still don't think in any of these engagement issues he's ever come out favourably. I think as a driver you start to wonder if there's a level of favouritism towards the other driver. It's just natural. You get paranoid. You're in a title fight, and I wonder if that's where we're at with him a little bit.
Would you expect the rules of engagement to change now that the Constructors' Championship is in the bag?
The drivers will make that decision anyway, and the guy who comes out on top was probably the one who's gone to the edge of those rules, or even a little bit beyond at times.
How good is George Russell?
Surely he's indispensable to Mercedes. It's starting to look like he is very much a champion in waiting, I think.
Rob, I'd love your take on Ferrari's season.
It's not a great place to be in Maranello when things aren't going well, but they've got to remain united. I've been in that situation. It's horrible.
Hello everyone and welcome to F1 Nation's preview of the United States Grand Prix with me, Tom Clarkson. I'm joined by F1 TV commentator and former Renault driver Jolyon Palmer and former Ferrari race engineer Rob Smedley. Let's start with McLaren. 6 races, 3 F1 sprints to go, and the first of those sprints is taking place in Austin this weekend. Oscar Piastri is 22 points clear of Lando Norris at the top of the table with 174 left to play for. Now, after what happened in Singapore, it feels like the intensity in the Drivers' Championship is climbing. Rob, let's start with you. What did you make of Lando and Oscar's incident on lap 1 in Singapore?
I think that when you start getting towards the pointy end of a World Championship, no matter how hard you work, it always gets difficult. It's always going to get touchy, right? There's so much on the line for the team and the 2 drivers within the team that it's always very, very difficult to manage. You know, I've been in that situation myself before, and you can't help. The drivers are such competitive animals that it spills over every now and again, you know. And there was this incident like we saw at the start of the Grand Prix. What did I think of that? I thought that it was probably Lando getting his elbows out, trying to go for a move that was just about there. It's the start of the race. You know, people will take slightly more risk at the start of the race. Did he do anything particularly wrong? Not really. Was Oscar right to feel aggrieved? Yes, probably. So you've got like this dichotomy. You're constantly trying to manage this pressure cooker inside the team. And there's never a perfect way to manage it. Somebody always comes off worse. I mean, we've seen that right throughout the season with McLaren, you know, when they've been dominating and they've been up, you know, they've been away up the road on their own. It's been a 1-2 for their cars. It's difficult to manage. It seems like a dream situation, you know, if you look from the midfield and think, God, I would love to have a car that dominant, but actually it's just a different situation with different problems that you have to manage, and I think McLaren are now facing that, and sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't get it right. It's as simple as that.
I think the interesting thing is I completely agree with all of that. It was a move that was on. I liked Lando's aggression. I thought it was the first time he's looked like he's really wanted to hustle in and take risks to make some points. You have to do the move at the start in Singapore, otherwise you're not going to make it. He obviously felt like he needs to beat Oscar every time now, because the 25-point gap, now a 22-point gap, you've got to see it start shrinking. The problem is, and why we talk about it and why it was controversial, was because of the way that McLaren have tried to manage things this year, I think. So they're almost their own stewards, aren't they? They're looking at the race and they're thinking, is this fair between the drivers? So Monza was an example of them deciding that wasn't fair. We gave Lando a bad pit stop. We need to swap the places round. And I think that's the sort of thing that's then in Oscar's head in Singapore. He's saying, well, hang on, that's not fair. He's just overtaken me by wheel banging and I've gone off. So surely now you need to swap the places back in the same way as you did to me 2 races ago. Problem is, as we said after Monza, you cannot keep like the micromanagement to this degree and keep it fair across the board. I think that's why we're just starting to see, I would say, Oscar be disgruntled with the way things are going, because there are quite a few things that are sort of going against him here.
So do you think the gloves are off now?
I think they are. I think they have to be, don't they? And I liked it from Lando. He took the gloves off. I would say he took the gloves off, and now Oscar's got to realise that that's it. They've got to come off. and you cannot afford to go half-baked into a championship fight. I was also thinking, no, I'd say at least double world champion has ever won the championship being nice. They're always nasty, aren't they? When you think about how Max Verstappen races and how he's not really had a teammate to fight, but he races hard. He races, win or bust. You look at Sebastian Vettel, the multi-21 with Mark Webber, went against the team orders, got away with it. The Turkey one, he was tough. He was really tough and ruthless. You look at other people, Fernando Alonso, you look at Lewis Hamilton, you look at Michael Schumacher. Yeah, they're all tough nuts, and they don't take team orders. They don't sit there and accept it. They'll fight for their cause and argue it afterwards, and I think that's what we're starting to get to. And
I've been in this situation before when you're trying to manage like the fairness between the drivers, right? What happens in an F1 race is there's always a butterfly effect, right? So if you take the Monza situation, it was a bad pit stop, but then before that, if you remember, they'd swapped the drivers in terms of the natural order in which they were going to pit, and before that something else happens. And when you're the driver is always in a situation where they pick that part of that whole chain of effects and say, oh, this is the bit that's affected me and this is the bit that's affected me badly. Quite often you'll find them, a driver might make a bad choice in qualifying and they put themselves on the back foot in the race, and then something will happen down the line where they choose to kind of pick something that is unfair for them. And I think that's why when it comes to what goes on the track, whether it's the pit stops themselves or the natural order of sometimes when you have to swap which driver comes in first, or you have to favor one driver over another because of something's happened in the race, that's just the way that these things play out. You can't pick an isolated incident and say this is fair or this is unfair. And I think that McLaren did the right thing in Singapore. The two drivers battled hard into the first corner. Again, I agree totally with you there here, Julian. It was great to see Lando showing a bit of aggression, showing that he wanted it. Because if he's going to have a chance at the World Championship, he's got to get in there. The team can't interfere on that. It was just the two guys racing hard together. Fair, unfair, I don't know. It's fair for somebody, it's unfair for somebody else. Get on with it. And I think that's the bit where once the lights go off, the teams, you've got your papaya rules or rules of engagement as they would be in any other team. Once the lights are off, it's kind of like whatever happens, you just have to get on with and deal with, and whatever the natural order is at the end, that's the natural order. Trying to get involved in it in the middle of it just creates problems, and it just creates angst, and it just creates a precedent that then one driver or another driver will come back and say, this happened there 3 years ago, so why are you now why are you doing something different?
Would you expect the rules of engagement to change now that the Constructors' Championship is in the bag?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. It now comes down to don't cause us a PR disaster, right? Maybe you can race a little bit harder. Maybe there can be a little bit more aggression. But I think the drivers, again, Julian made the point, the drivers will make that decision anyway, and the guy who comes out on top was probably the one who's gone to the edge of those rules, or even a little bit beyond at times. I worked with Michael for so many years across lots of those World Championships. He was utterly ruthless, and he went to the edge and beyond on occasions, as we all know, of what was acceptable. But he did that to get 7 stars. He's a 7-star general. He didn't do that by seeding and by thinking, oh well, what does the team want me to do here, and will the team be upset with me? He that wasn't at the forefront of his mind at all. It was, how do I win this race, and what means do I have, what are the tools that I have, the car underneath me, but everything else that I've got as well, and I'm going to put them all on the table and use every single one of them. If that's aggression or going beyond sportsman behavior at times, as we saw on occasion with him, and we see with all the top guys, then so be it. You just have to kind of get on with it. So I think we would all like to see a little bit more aggression from the two drivers in battling each other, the two McLaren drivers, and see which one comes out on top. That's what we watch Grand Prix racing for, right?
The other thing though is, if you imagine it from Oscar's point of view, I still don't think in any of these moments, engagement issues, he's ever come out favourably. If I'm just thinking again, top of my head stuff, but you got the Silverstone one. He got a penalty, felt it was harsh, asked for the team to swap back if they thought it was harsh. They would have done. Had it been, Max, they would have thought it was an outrageous penalty. But because it was between the two McLarens, they kept the order. Lando wins. You've then got the Budapest strategy, where Oscar was the lead driver. Kind of got a bit done by his own team on strategy there, with Lando winning the race.